Hello, I'm Kristen, also known as Voolenvine, here on my YouTube channel, on Instagram, on Ravelry, and pretty much everywhere else on the interwebs. And as always, I'm so happy that you're taking some time out of your day to chat about all the knitting, all the sewing, all the making, or whatever crafty rabbit hole I happen to be diving down this week. And I hope wherever you are in the world, you are continuing to stay safe, stay well, and creative during these these times. I'm running out of adjectives. What kind of adjectives do we have? We have unprecedented, we have uncertain, we have crazy, we have... I digress. Welcome to the podcast. I have a fun show for you this week, but before I get into what I've been making, just a couple of announcements, and one of those announcements is incredibly special and exciting, and if you do subscribe to my newsletter or follow me on Instagram, you might have already caught wind of this, but are you ready for it? Drumroll. I've joined Patreon. Yes, you heard right. I joined Patreon, and this was not a spontaneous decision by any means. This is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, for the past couple of months, and planning, and I wanted it to feel right when I launched, and I'm not gonna lie, it was scary hitting that launch button, but once I did, it felt really good, and I have to say the response was amazing. But for those of you that are just learning about this, let me explain why I've joined Patreon. As you know, I have been podcasting for quite some time. I want to say I'm coming up on about 10 years now. So clearly I really enjoy creating content for you, and I've also received feedback from you letting me know how much you do enjoy it. So, however, if you are not familiar, I am the hand dyer behind Voolenvine Yarns, my hand-dyed yarn company, and that is my full-time job. Everything that I publish here on my YouTube channel is done in my spare time. It's fun. And after exploring several other avenues of, what I could do to maybe free up some time, it seemed like Patreon was the way to go. So with your support, I will be able to free up more time to create more of the content you love. So be it in the form of vlogs, tutorials. I would also love the opportunity to create a community around this channel where we can, just come together, chat, hang out, and I also want to keep inspiring you guys. So as a thank you, those who, have been following my work and want to keep supporting it, I am going to be offering some more behind the scenes photos, videos, and additional fun content for you guys to enjoy over on the Patreon page. But if you're watching this and decide that, hey, becoming a patron is not for you at the moment, I completely understand. I do not expect you to become a patron if it's not within your budget or your means or your interest. The fact that you are here and watching my YouTube channel and enjoying it and just partaking in the comments below or in our knit-alongs, whatever shape form your support comes in, I am just super thankful and grateful that you're here, and it means the world. So I just want to say that, and a huge thank you to everyone who has already become a patron over on the Patreon site. So it's going to be so much fun, you guys. I cannot wait to see where it goes. One more announcement before I get into what I've been making this week, and that is to mention our history make-along. That is a year-long make-along in which we are all endeavoring to create something historically inspired, and by historically inspired I mean anything prior to the 1950s. It can be historically accurate, it can be historically inspired, whatever your craft is. If you want to knit, sew, weave, embroider, whatever your craft of choice is, you're welcome to join, and you can do so by hopping over to the Voolenvine Ravelry group, which of course is the place to be if you want to partake in any of these make-alongs. And as always, it's such a fun and lively, chattery group full of tons of inspiration. If you are looking for project ideas, seriously, look no further than that thread. There's just so much happening in there, so do check that out, and I hope you join along. And that said, on to what is currently on my needles. Well, I've been incredibly monogamous when it comes to whips this week, my friends. And to prove it, I have a finished back of a HusBEAST sweater. And the pattern is the Cain Sweater by Storey, which he designed for the Rowan Yarn Company. And the yarn that I'm using is Rowan Felted Tweed in the charcoal colorway. And yeah, I don't know, in this lighting, it does look a little bit denim blue. Because as I mentioned, it does have a tendency to change color depending on the lighting, which I think is pretty cool. but it definitely has cool blue undertones to it, even though the name of the yarn is charcoal. I think in more warmer lights it looks more charcoal than blue, but here we are in daylight, and it's looking daylight blue. The back is complete, and now I am on to the front, which is essentially knit in the same manner as the back, except I believe the shaping for the armholes is a little bit different, and the neckline shaping is a little different as well. But for the most part, it's just ribbing and stockinette, all I really want to work on at the moment. So yeah, again, it took a pandemic for me to cast Dennis on a sweater, but here we are. As I mentioned in previous episodes, I did swatch. I was a good girl. I swatched, and I did not get gauge with the recommended needle size. I actually went down a full needle size, so I'm knitting the ribbing with a US size 2, which is a 2.75 millimeter needle, and I did go down to I believe, what was it, a size 4, US size 4 needle for the body. Yeah, so it's coming along really, really nicely. The only thing that I will say is that the knitting pattern is incredibly condensed and sparse. I did have to just kind of take a moment and reread everything, go through all the Ravelry notes to make sure I was doing the armhole decreases correctly. They don't specify making the decreases on the right or wrong side of your work. It's just kind of, it's a little bit cryptic. That's the word I'm looking for. But as Marie Forleo says, everything is figure-outable, and this pattern is certainly figure-outable. So I'm making it happen. I'm making it work. So there we are with the Cain pullover. And that is all the knitting content I have for this episode. I know. I've been very monogamous, although I will say that I am getting, the knitting mojo is making a comeback. It's poking its head up, and I do feel inspired to cast on something. I've already started swatching for a potentially new pattern. I know I have a couple of pattern designs in the works, in the wings, that need finishing, that need fleshing out. There's no method to my madness, my friends. I think going forward, I'm just not going to talk about them on the podcast, because I feel like that puts pressure on me to actually move forward with them, and that, for some reason, that just kind of makes me, I don't know, not want to work on them. I can't describe it, but that's my creative process. I just need to keep things on the DL until I'm ready to talk about that. That's what I'm realizing about myself as a designer, at least. So anyway, that's my personal brand of crazy, if you will. So yes, and I'm trying to think, knitting content-wise, what I'm wearing. I am wearing my Love Note pullover, a pattern by Tin Can Knits, and this sweater gets so much wear, my friends. I'm actually wearing this today because it is a little chilly out. Spring is here, but the cool weather does not want to go away. It's just a cropped sweater that I knit out of my hand-dyed yarns, Voolenvine yarns, in the Bronte colorway, holding 2 strands of yarn together, one of which is my Nouveau base, a superwash merino single ply, and my Ghost lace, which is a lace weight mohair silk blend. And yeah, I really, really love it, you guys. Yeah, probably one of my most worn sweaters to date. And yeah, by the way, I published a vlog this week showing off my shawls that I've knit over time, and so many of you really enjoyed that. That makes me so happy. And you have been requesting a similar vlog just showing off all the sweaters that I've made, and that is definitely coming down the pike, hopefully next week. So stay tuned for that. As for sewing, I have finished my Fifi pajamas, a pattern by Tilly and the Buttons. I don't have them here to share with you today because I've worn them and they are currently in the wash. So unfortunately, I don't have them to show off on the podcast. I know. I could not hold out. I could not resist wearing them to bed. They are everything, and oh, they're just so good. I love the finished garment, guys. I highly recommend the pattern. I did blog about it, so I will pop a link to my blog post with all the details, the sewing, you know, the size, fitting, modifications that I made to it. All that can be found in the blog post. And I'll pop a photo here so you can see what the finished object looks like. I did share it on my Instagram feed. As I mentioned, the straps, I did end up cutting the straps off and angling them in a different direction so they did lie flat across my chest. That was a pretty simple fix, and you know, I just hand whip stitched them in place, and it just had a really, I'm really pleased with the way that turned out. But yes, all the modification details I made can be found in the blog post, which I will link down in the description box, along with everything else that I mentioned on this podcast. The other project, as I mentioned, that I have in the wings that has actually commenced is my Death Becomes Her recreation. This was a gown that I spotted at the Met when they had their Death Becomes Her exhibit, which showcased all of these mourning gowns from Victorian times, Edwardian times, basically 100 years of mourning fashion. And this one dress in particular bogarted my heart. I was just like, I need to have that in my wardrobe. I want to make that. And 5 years later, I'm still thinking about it. So I'm pulling the trigger, and I'm going to recreate this gown. I don't care if I never wear it in public. I just want to have this in my wardrobe. I want the experience of making it. And yeah, it's just something, it's a passion project, really. So, and I've already started posting progress photos over on the Patreon page. So if you are a patron or become a patron, you can see those progress photos, just kind of, you know, behind the scenes, you know, photos of the mock-ups that I'm doing, fabrics that I'm looking at. So if you find that stuff fascinating, definitely check it out. But yes, I did create the first mock-up for the corset, which is from this book, Corsets and Crinolines by Nora Waugh. So this is a pattern that was drafted from an original 1844 corset, early Victorian era. In order for me to make this pattern, I have to print out the pattern from the book and scale it up and cut out the pattern pieces. And the way that you do that, she actually gives you a scale here. So you have to keep blowing it up until these little increments equal 1 inch. So that was a labor of love in itself, my friends. So that took a lot of trial and error until I got the size just right. And then after that, I just basically put this down on my printer scanner and just kept rotating and rotating and printing until all the pieces were printed out, and I taped everything together, and we have a scaled up pattern. So yeah, as you can see, I have already started altering, you know, adjusting the fit and whatnot. This is going to be a lengthy process, my friends. So yeah, and again, I talk about this at length over on the Patreon page, but to give you guys just a little recap, here's my first mock-up. But as I mentioned in the last episode, I enrolled with Foundations Revealed, which in a nutshell is basically the Hogwarts of sewing. It's just a library of a well of information when it comes to hand sewing, sewing with machine, historical fashion. I can go on and on. Not sponsored, just a fan. And yeah, I've basically been taking advantage of my enrollment membership and asking the mentors, you know, here's my mock-up, what am I doing, what do I do next? And I did watch one of their video replays on fitting a corset and to getting a perfect fit. So basically when you're creating these mock-ups, you're supposed to put them together as if you were sewing the real deal. And, you know, that means boning everything, putting in the laces, and using a fabric that's very similar to the final garment. So the final garment that I'm going to be using is cotillion and satin or silk, I believe. I think I'm going to be using silk for the finished corset that I'm creating. But I do have this tightly woven muslin fabric in my stash, which it does not have any stretch or give to it whatsoever. It's very stiff, and while it's not cotillion or as heavyweight as cotillion, it does have similar properties. So I think this is a good fit for, you know, making up all my mock-ups, and I have a lot of it, so I can just keep making and making and making them until it fits. But for the first mock-up, I thought I would just kind of forgo boning and lacing and the bells and whistles and just create a slapdash mock-up to get a ballpark fit. However, at the end of the day, I probably should have just added the bells and whistles, because when I tried this on, everything was just either, you know, baggy or long. I couldn't get an idea of where my waist and bust set in relation to this, because right now it's jelly. There's no form or shape to it. So you know, I took to the Facebook group for Foundations Revealed, and thankfully the mentors got back to me and gave me so much helpful information. And I've heeded their advice, which was so incredibly helpful, and kind of like, duh, Kristen, why didn't you think of that? Because a lot of the times when you're adjusting patterns, you think of width and not so much length. And as I mentioned, the first 12 that I whipped up was way too long, and basically I just had to start from scratch again, find my waist and measure the distance from my underbust to my waist, and then my waist to my hip, and then compare it to the measurements of the original pattern, and then adjust accordingly. Sounds a little more complicated than it is, but I'm very proud of myself of the alterations that I've made to the pattern piece. The final test will actually be, did I do it right? And if not, I will just go back to the Facebook group and pick the mentors' brains again. But I have high hopes. I have high hopes that I will have made progress with this alteration that I've just shown you. Anyway, that was a lot of rambling and a lot of information, and I hope you guys are still with me, but that's what I've been working on. And I feel like this weekend I might need a little palette cleanser just to kind of clear the decks, give myself a little more instant gratification. So I do have some other sewing plans in mind, and that is to possibly whip up one of these numbers. And this is Butterick, let me see, no, Very Easy Vogue V9265. It's a very simple princess-themed A-line dress with balloon sleeves, which are all the rage right now. And I actually did attempt to make this pattern in the past a couple months ago, but that was a tale of woe, which I kind of want to shove under the rug. But what happened was it was made of chiffon fabric, and I'm still getting used to working with delicate, slippery, tricky fabrics. And I did mess up on the French seams with that, and I ran out of fabric, and I couldn't source any new fabric or replacement fabric that I could work with. So unfortunately, that got tossed into the waste bin. So, but we don't have to talk about it anymore. I'm starting over. I have this fabric in my stash, which is quilting cotton. I love the print, but I'm not too gung-ho about the quilting cotton aspect of it. It's a little bit stiff, and I think I need something a little bit more drapey, but I don't know, it might be able to work. We'll see. The other option is this fabric here, which is 100% linen. It's got a little weight to it, but it has a nice drape, and it is a little pink. I'm wondering if it's a little too pink for my liking. The website, I don't know, the website did say mauve, which is why I jumped on it, and it was a little bit darker and more mauvey, so to speak, on the website. But, you know, I decided to keep it because, I don't know, I can't put my foot on it, but something about it speaks to me. So I might make this dress out of this fabric. I think this is what I'm going to be working on over the weekend. Yeah, because as I mentioned, I definitely need a little mental break from all the alterations that I've been making from making to the corset pattern. And yeah, but anyway, I'm still having a lot of fun. I'm very proud of myself by the progress that I've been making. And yeah, so anyway, I believe that is it for the content of the episode. I know it was a little sparse this week, just because I've been monogamously plugging away at Dennis's sweater, and I just had a lot of things going on. I am going to move along to the Blather segment, a segment where I chat about what's been happening in my life, should you care to stick around. As for life stuff, I actually finished reading Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and I'm still digesting it. I haven't really processed it. I don't know, I take a while to process these things, guys. It's just my personal brand of crazy, but anyway, I will say off the bat, it's not my favorite series, I don't know, I'm curious to see where it goes. It's only the first book in a new series that she's writing. I really felt like I wasn't connecting with the main characters, if that makes any sense. I give it, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, I would say a 3.5. So not bad, not terrible. I do recommend it if you are into fantasy, sci-fi, world building, and Sarah J. Maas in particular. So definitely check that out if that's up your alley. But other than that, I did pick up a book by Charolotte Bronte. As you know, Jane Eyre also is one of my favorite books of all time, and I'm pretty embarrassed to say that I have not read any other Charlotte Bronte books. Whoops. But I did start reading her novel, Vilette, this week, which I believe is her last novel that she ever wrote. And so far, I am loving every minute of it. I'm only on chapter 3 or 4, but I'm completely absorbed. I can't describe it. I just really, truly enjoy her writing. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this book. So do check that out if you are a Bronte fan. And I'm trying to think what else is happening. Dennis and I are binging on Peaky Blinders. So good. We are on season 3, and I think we have about like 3 or 4 more seasons to go. It's like, what log have we been living under? I mean, yeah. It's just such a good series. I'm gonna sign off here. Thank you so much again for hanging out with me this week, and if you did enjoy this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe below. I put out a video for your viewing pleasure every Friday or Saturday, and until the next video, happy knitting, happy sewing, happy making, and I'll see you next time. Bye!